Uh, Hi, everybody. Welcome to our open book. Very good to be with you. Nice to be with you today. We have so look forward to welcoming Jen Phillips. We we had a wonderful evening. Was it was it last week where I
Yeah.
read about 20 minutes of the book? So
Yes, no.
you're very familiar with her wonderful novel Ruby Falls now, and there have been we've looked a little bit at the Substack stuff, and so we welcome her. I guess on book tour. She's in Concord, Massachusetts, and
Yes,
thank
thanks
you very much.
so much, Scott.
Thanks, Mickey. Let me try and set up the premise of this novel because I enjoy doing that. A psychic, his wife, his manager, a Chicago reporter, and they always get the goods. And a couple of guys get stuck in a cave with a massive underground waterfall, and they're all looking for a hat pin. Now, was this the beginning of a joke or of a publicity stunt? It's Jen's new novel, Ruby Falls, set in 1932 in Chattanooga, Tennessee. Shortly after a real life caver, Leo Lambert did find an underground waterfall and named it for his wife. So, Jen, I'm so glad that you can join us. And you're familiar with the Ruby Falls is an actual place, and you've been there, right?
Right, right. So, I mean, it's interesting where people have heard about it and where they haven't, but kind of all up, I think pretty big chunks of the eastern seaboard would have seen the signs that have been up since the Depression. They used to paint your barn for free if you could paint "See Ruby Falls" on it. And yeah, so it's in Chattanooga, Tennessee, and still extremely popular. I had never been, and from the we went back in maybe 2019, and you hop off an elevator, you're underground, and as about as soon as we stepped out, I thought, "This is a place I'd really like to set a book."
And there's kind of an actual incident in history, isn't there, that kind of helped your planning?
Yeah, I mean, so sort of character and plot together. I mean, when you land and the novel is true to life, to the real life discovery of the fall. So when you go on the tour, the first thing they tell you is how Leo Lambert uh, was was drilling, and another crazy idea was having an elevator shaft drilled from the top of Lookout Mountain to the bottom of Lookout Mountain back in 1929, but excuse me, 1928, uh, in order to make the caverns at the bottom of the mountain an accessible tourist attraction. And as they're drilling that elevator shaft, the workmen feel a blast of air from a hole, sort of like the maybe 18 by 18, and that blast of air tells them there's something back there. And like a lunatic, Leo Lambert decides he'll crawl through there and see what's there. He's gone for 17 hours. People think he's dead. They're sure so the tunnel's collapsed on him. Instead, he crawls back out, filthy, soaking wet, to say he's just laid eyes on this massive waterfall that no human being has ever laid eyes on before. Uh, because it's in a bubble, basically, in the middle of a mountain. And I love that. I love the notion of what in the world would make you dive into this hole no one's explored before and not assume that there's all manner of terrible creatures you never want to see. So yeah, that was kind of the beginning. The both the character and plot come from that notion of what makes you want to dive in to utter blackness and the unknown? And then also, there is another story up in South Dakota in Wind Cave of an actual psychic who promised that he could find a hat pin in many more miles of caverns. Using only the power of his mind. And also, he was blindfolded, the original actual psychic. Which I don't use because I don't think people would believe it. It's one of those real life things that's a touch too much for fiction. So I sort of blended those two, the location of Ruby Falls and that background, with this one other publicity stunt um, that seemed to work really well of what might have been.
What Well, I wanted to talk a lot about your central character, Ada.
Mhm.
She's a local. She finds a sense of wonder, purpose, dare I say, love in the cave.
Yeah. I mean, I loved writing Ada. I kind of believe that you can never You can never really write a book that's not about yourself on some level. You stare at that blank page and just almost, even if you don't mean to, whatever's spiraling through your head, whatever worries or preoccupations, I think have a way of finding their way onto the page. It's just too many hundreds of pages for yourself to not land there, maybe in some ways you didn't intend. But I lost several women in my family in the last few years. My great aunt, my grandmother, my stepmom, who passed away last year. And all of them were women who had been taught you grow up, you get married, you have kids, that's your life. And I really watched them all struggle with that in different ways. But even the ones who did follow that path, um, in those last decades really struggled with what you do when there's no one left in the house to take care of. And so I think my grief and loss is part of Ada, who's lost a lot of people in her life, but she's also someone who had the thought that you get married and have kids. Only she does realize very firmly, dear God, there's all these years left, which of course is true for everyone. It's not the end of any narrative. And I really wanted to write a character who hits that point and doesn't see the end of that particular narrative as a wall, but as freedom, and who embraces what comes next and the fact that the 50-year-old version of herself is actually much more interesting and much more competent than the 25-year-old version.
Mm. And let me ask about the publicity stunt part because
Mhm.
your novel set in the Depression, at the onset of the Depression, and there's a fall off in tourism there at Ruby Falls.
Right?
And the psychic presents this idea, and as I think we talked on my show in NPR a couple of weeks ago, in that time in the early 1930s. Well, there are psychics that are working entertainers nowadays, but in the 1930s, there was some people believed in the power of psychics, didn't they? I guess some people still do.
Right. I mean, I think we're at a really interesting time scientifically as well, where we're starting to learn about germs and microbes and the spread of disease and, medicines that seem magical. Uh, and I think it makes some sense that sort of the notion of the unknown and what might be out there does expand a little bit to, well, if there are microscopic things we can't see that make us sick, how is that different than the notion that you might be able to talk to the dead, that the veil between the worlds um is not as thick as we thought. Like, what's the difference between spirits and germs? And there were a lot of people taking advantage of that. I think a lot of mind readers and a lot of seances and a lot of people who were eager to believe. And I liked playing with that too, of sort of right when with and everything becomes a little more intense if you trap a bunch of people a few 100 feet underground. I think so. There's a lot of things to play with.
Well, and I loved, I think it was Ada's phrase, darkness and tight spaces don't always bring out the best in people.
No, I mean, I enjoyed my research and time in the caves a lot. I enjoyed it because I had a very competent guide who I and a time limit where I felt no one was even attempting to
Oh,
find
so
Hat
so you
Pin.
didn't have a psychic bring you through, huh?
And I think that would have felt very different had I needed to find a hat pin, while I was down there. But no, I think if you stuck me down there for a day or 2,
Yes, they are.
it
Well, yeah.
it
What
it
what
would have been a very different experience.
what, when you're in the midst of writing a novel like this, were you ever overwhelmed by a sense of panic? Not overwhelmed, because you gotta keep writing, but I wonder if that ever came into your heart while you were writing.
Do you mean panic in the sense of something similar to what the characters feel? Of
Yeah.
something phobic or no, I mean, so I've talked to you before about another novel I wrote, Fierce Kingdom takes place during a public shooting. and it's a mother and her child. The child was the same age as my child at the time, and I understand why readers would think surely that same emotion that you're feeling as a reader would be magnified if you're the one creating it. But I mean, I think you're so concerned with the architecture, whatever, with the architecture of the story, with the way things are being laid out, that there is this sort of wall between the emotions the characters are feeling and what you're writing. So no, I mean, in fact, I think I found it really hard at times to get into the mindset of the characters who were more phobic. In which case, I just imagined that it was a room full of roaches instead of a room
Yeah.
underground. That's the only thing I can try to put my mind in the same space of just blind, pure panic that has no logic at all.
When you're done with the novel, is it ever really behind you?
Hmm. I mean, and maybe nice. Huh. I mean, at the very moment, I think when you finish a novel, you're desperate for it to be behind you. I think there is a point at which it feels like my brain is full and I've got nothing. Like I am going to screw this up if I continue to work on it. I've sort of done it so much, I've lost my objectivity. But the characters, absolutely. I mean, I think there is a sense that there is a little blur there of fictional people and real people for me, that it feels like someone I have known in the past that is now still a part of me and pops into my head in a very pleasant memories every now and then. If I liked them. I don't tend to think of the bad guys that much, I don't guess.
Yeah. What about the Chicago Reporter?
No, contrary to what you believe, I'm very fond of Chicago reporters. I feel
Yeah.
like they play a crucial role.
Yes, I know. Yes. All right. Not to okay. Not to uh I let me consult with our technical crew because I am seeing nothing registering. I hate to put
No, 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 we have plenty of
No.
yes.
oh, do we?
Yeah,
Okay,
yes.
because on I'm just
Not
showing
talking
one
to yourself.
here. What?
Okay, you're not just talking to yourself.
Okay. I thought we had another technical problem.
Okay, now I see lots of little hearts and
Yeah.
words.
Oh, I
Yes,
don't see
yes,
any
yes.
little hearts. They must all like gin, right?
Yes,
This
yes,
is
that's
it.
what that
Yeah.
is.
Nothing for me, right? Once again, the Chicago Reporter.
Shafted again.
Yeah, exactly. Comes up short. How many novels do you have going in your mind and heart at the same time?
Oh, geez, that's such a good question. Almost always 2 to 4. I mean, I do try to focus on the one that I'm sort of the furthest along with, but, yeah, I don't know. I mean, I feel like the same thing that maybe makes you like to write stories in the first place makes you drift away to one even when you don't mean to. And then maybe in some ways, because you're sort of locked into one, the fun part is often the fun part. All the parts are pretty fun. This is not, in my mind, like the hardest job in the world. You get paid to make stuff up. It's a good gig, but the most fun part can be the original idea before you put anything on paper, before you sort of lessen the original idea, which was perfect in your mind. So I think often I'll be in the middle of something and think of something else and start sketching out, at least in my head, kind of an outline of character and where that might go. But I mean, I don't think I've ever had writer's block. There's always, if anything, too many ideas, and you don't have time to get to them all and do them all justice.
Would you ever go on a caving vacation?
Absolutely. I'd love to do mammoth caves in Kentucky. I'm having a little trouble convincing my husband that this is anything that we should do, but and the plus to that is I'm having some friends volunteer to go instead. My child is not that interested either, but no, I love
They
to.
ought to sell this novel in the gift shop of all these caving operations.
That's what I think too. It would you should talk to them.
All right, now the last question I want to run by you, and I know it's a stretch, but I thought there's some similarities between writing a novel and exploring a cave, aren't there?
No, sure. I mean, maybe to some extent that depends on how much you map out your book ahead of
Mm.
time. I mean, to me, the fun part of caves is you don't quite know what's coming next. And also in some ways, what works best, although you have to know what's coming next, you have to focus very intently on what's 2 feet in front of you, that most of your mind needs to be in this exact moment, in this exact frame. I think that's true too, that you need some general sense of the big picture, but it works best when you can really zero in on a very set moment in time and the texture of that moment and the people living it. Um, and yeah, some of it stays dark, some of it lights up, that you gotta kinda aim your light in different ways to see what's gonna pan out. No, that's a really good metaphor you came up with there. I think there's a lot we can do with that.
Good, good. We can share it. By the way, I regret the fact that I was going to end the interview tonight by going, wait a minute, that's a hat pin. But I couldn't find one.
I'd be surprised if you just had a hat pin lurking.
You know, I know
You-
where there one is.
You would be surprised the things we find in the
We
apartment.
can find it, yeah. Particularly the Chicago Reporter can't find the hat pin, but I don't mean to. All right. Well, thank you very Jen Phillips. It's a terrific book, Ruby Falls, her latest novel, and I'm
Thanks so much, Scott.
so glad that we were able to finally make the connection and to be able to bring you on to
Yes,
to
thank you.
people.
Thank you for your one-man show last week. Much appreciated.
Well, I hope I did your novel justice. I enjoyed reading those sections, so I thought it was quite good. Look, everybody, thanks very much for being with us on our open book. We have some other stuff coming this week, and we will let you know. So thanks very much for being with us, and we'll see you later.
Thank you. And thank everybody.
Take care, Jen. Bye-bye.